Hello and welcome, guys, to another conversation with your money and mindset coach, MoneyFit MD. Thank you guys for tuning in. Today, I will be talking to you guys about the idea of instant gratification versus long-term gains and how to develop that culture and how to help yourself if you're struggling with having a long-term mindset. So it's interesting because as physicians, we have been in training for a long time. And we are experts at delayed gratification. We are experts at thinking long-term gains, right? Because if you think about it, a lot of our colleagues and classmates graduated from college, and got jobs or went for a master's degree, or some people did a PhD as well. For physicians, we're doing 4 years at least minimum after college, and then another 3 to 7 or 8 years sometimes after that before we finally become a fully pledged attendant, right? So we are experts at delayed gratification. But what I find is that we use almost all of our energy and all of our resources and all of our minds in medicine, and then everything else tends to suffer, right? So my hope and my goal is to help us bring the same consciousness that we've applied towards our training in medicine into every other part of our lives, specifically our finances. But that also can be in any relationship, right? With your spouse, with your kids, with just yourself as well. And that's something that I think is really important. So the thing about short-term gains is this: when things are interesting in the short term, when we're like, it's like a sugar high, what it does is it gives us like this dopamine high that we're like, oh my goodness, I feel good. This is great, right? So we spent all day, we spent like 60 hours working in medicine. You spend 80 hours working in medicine, and you're like looking for this win. You're like, hey, give me something that's going to make me feel good right now, right? You're looking for that dopamine surge. And what happens is a lot of times we turn to things outside of medicine. We turn to things like Amazon. We go shopping sprees. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. And I enjoy good shopping as well. But my hope is that we can bring our level of consciousness into other parts of our lives, because what ends up happening is because we're just looking for short-term wins and that dopamine surge, we are now looking for, it almost becomes addictive, right? Where we're spending money that we hadn't planned on spending. We're just not bringing consciousness into that part of life. And what ends up happening is now we're having to spend more time in medicine in order to get the money that make up for the money we've spent here. We're having to spend more time in medicine, and that increases our burnout. So overall, it leads to this bad cycle that I'm really hoping we can all break in medicine. So if you're watching and you're like, okay, all right, I get it. Long-term gains, short-term gains, delayed gratification. How do I go about doing that? So let's talk about your money life. So in the short term, if you're looking for short-term gains, what's going to happen is that you end up overspending, right? Because you're like, I want to feel good in the short term. I'm going to go on a shopping spree, retail therapy, anybody, right? But when you think more long-term, you actually get to sit down and think, okay, do I really want this stuff? Is it really going to add value to my life? Because as you may know, I'm not about the frugal life. I'm more about the value-based life, right? Where we're spending money in things that add value to our life and cutting it out in things that don't add value to our lives. So if you're thinking about value-based spending, you have to ask yourself, is this something that I actually need? So what I want you to start doing is this number one question is I want you to set a time frame. When you're thinking of those things that you're overspending on, you're using to buffer your emotions in the short term, I want you to set a time frame for yourself where you're like, okay, anytime I want to buy a purchase of this and it feels like I'm just binging on something, I need to give myself a day or two to make sure that I'm making that decision from the right place. Every time I do that stuff, I'm telling you guys, 80% of the time, I end up not buying that. Right? So again, setting whatever that time frame is for you. Some people choose 3 days, some choose 2 days, some choose 1 day, some choose hours. But find that time amount that will be helpful for you to try and decrease the amount of instant gratification or binging or looking for a dopamine high that you may be actually thinking of without you actually knowing. Number 2 is gratitude. Gratitude always wins. When you find that you're going more for short-term gains only at the expense of delayed gratification or long-term gains, what I want you to start thinking of is, how am I practicing my gratitude? What am I thankful for? Because what that does is it brings that unconscious thing you're about to do and brings it into your consciousness. So now you're like, okay, right, I'm thankful that I have food. I'm thankful for this purse that I have. I'm thankful that I am safe. I'm thankful. And what happens is that you start to go beyond the material and start to think more of the big picture. And suddenly that short-term win that you're looking for, that little dopamine high, you don't need it anymore, because now you're filled with gratitude about all the things that you already have in your life. And then number 3 is you have to remind yourself of your goals. Very, very important, right? What are your goals? Have you written down your goals? It's important to write them down, because if you don't write it down, you're not going to be able to hold yourself accountable to it. And also, if you don't write it down, it makes it hard to check the box. And there's nothing that feels as great as like checking off those boxes of the goals that you've achieved. So whenever you're trying to spend that extra money you had no plans to, whenever you're about to instantly buffer or just get that quick dopamine high, ask yourself, how is this helping my goals? Is this getting me closer or farther from my goals? Again, there are times when you're going to go, well, no, forget it, I just want this anyway. And nothing wrong with that. The challenge and the problem is that when it becomes a habit, when now you're looking for a dopamine to feel good, as opposed to looking internally and being internally self-sufficient and self-confident. All right. And then the last one is practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. Just like riding a bike. You don't start and become excellent in one day, right? Well, there are some exceptions to that rule, but in general, you don't. So I want you to just be patient with yourself, understand that practice, practice, practice. So just to make sure we are on the same page, and just to review for everybody that's listening, the number 1 thing is like create a rule for yourself. How much time are you going to be giving yourself before you make purchases? That way you're able to decrease impulse buying, right? Number 2 is ask yourself, is gratitude, what am I thankful for? Gratitude. And then number 3 is, how does this help my goal? Does this get me to what? Or farther away from my goal? And number 4 is practice, practice, practice. So I would like to hear from you. What are you practicing right now? What ways are you stopping instant gratification and looking more for delayed gratification, aka long-term wins? All right, you guys have a fantastic rest of the day. Bye-bye.